Greetings everyone, I am Dr. J and welcome to my review of The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. One could not ask for better timing for a Zelda game like this to be released. Following the success of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, one might expect that games like that would be the new norm, that the linear puzzle-solving dungeon-crawling adventures would no longer be the main focus. And yet, a little over a year after the release of Tears of the Kingdom, we're surprised with not just a new Zelda game, but one that takes advantage of the art style of the Link's Awakening remaster to give us a pseudo-2D adventure where Zelda is our playable character. Well, once we get past a small introductory segment with Link anyway. To some extent, it wasn't what I asked for, but it was what I wanted. My opinion on Breath of the Wild is an unusual one, as I'm someone who has a strong disdain for open world elements, and felt that making an open world Zelda game was too much of a departure from what I enjoyed the most about the franchise, with the first game I played to completion being Twilight Princess. Tears of the Kingdom fixed up most of the issues I had, to where it was easier to get in the groove and get that feeling everyone else had while playing its predecessor. But even then, the fact that there wasn't as much of a set path meant that dungeons couldn't be as creative from a puzzle-solving standpoint. With that in the back of my mind, there was some concern for this particular outing, as they made a big deal about Zelda's main way of interacting with the world not being through direct combat, but through exploiting an ever-expanding list of so-called echoes, which could be used to traverse a level or summon monsters to fight for you. Giving us so many options had the potential to render the dungeon design moot, but also had the potential to lead to a lot of creative levels as well. So it was a toss-up as to whether I'd be getting what I asked for or not. Thus, I entered the game with a mix of excitement and concern, but within the first 2 hours, the concerns had been almost entirely cast aside. To get to the game directly, it doesn't even give you a menu when you first jump in, but instead has you take control of Link. After fighting through some enemies and confronting Ganon, Link is seemingly victorious, but then finds himself consumed by a rift that appears on the ground. Before being lost to the void, he shoots an arrow and a prison Zelda is held in, which buys her a chance to escape and to report all she's seen to her father, the king. Unfortunately, before he can do anything, a rift swallows him whole, and leaves behind an imposter that frames Zelda for the rift's appearance. Were it not for a spirit calling itself Tri, that might have been the end, but we learn over the course of the game that it's one of many spirits that are meant to heal the land whenever rifts like what we've seen appear. They do this through a collective version of the echo power it grants Zelda, allowing her to take one look at an object or defeated monster and make an exact duplicate of it. Thus, using that power, she sets out, seeking those who can help her bring peace back to the land and to heal the rifts that have emerged all over Hyrule. To properly explain how the core gameplay loop functions, we can look at how the first dungeon introduces a couple of mechanics, as that sets the pattern for how almost everything in this game operates. The first of these is an ability to move objects around. First, you use it to either press down or clear the way for you to go press a button, which opens the way to the next room. Then you can use it to clear the entrance to the next area, and if you're feeling clever, you might think, oh, if it goes wherever I go, then jumping means I can get it out of this rut and use it to bridge the gap here. There's also a point where the same circumstance is done in a side-scrolling section, to help communicate that anything that can be done in a top-down section also applies to side-scrolling rooms. The dungeon also offers chances to show the power's limitations, as you can close or widen the gap based on where walls and terrain are located, allowing you to use a ramp to move this statue to press a button, and eventually combine that with the echo power to allow you to make the steps required to repeat that process elsewhere. As a second mechanic, after defeating a mini-boss, you get access to a sword with an energy meter attached to it. During the sword mode, you can't summon new echoes, but can directly attack enemies for as long as the energy meter isn't empty. According to a dev interview, the plan was to originally have Link be the playable character as per usual, but they found when you're able to just slash your way through every problem, that the echo power becomes a lot less relevant. So, to ensure it had a chance to shine, it was granted to Zelda and she was made the playable character. However, because you'll run into cases where it'll be more efficient to just slash away at an enemy, especially for boss monsters, they parceled out some of Link's equipment but gated behind the energy bar. It's a solid compromise to allow you to brute force a particularly dangerous encounter without completely removing your reliance on summoned minions. And to make sure you're encouraged to use it at specific points, and therefore get a sense for its ability, they give you an abundant amount of the material required to replenish it, and a couple of points where you need to slash away with the sword in order to move on. Outside of an occasional tutorial prompt, these are ideas that are intuitively picked up through the level design, ensuring that we get a proper handle on how our toolkit works without needing to spell it out explicitly. From here, you can feel amply prepared to take on whatever spin or circumstance the game throws at you, as this pattern appears for everything from traversal to puzzle solving to monster slaying. Go to an area, be presented with an objective, figure out the means to make it over to the objective and/or clear out enemies along the way, rinse and repeat. As you might expect, there are some aspects that you'll see throughout, but there's plenty of variety due to the number of echoes and lots of cool applications for them. So all in all, you've got a solid core gameplay loop that can hold your attention fairly well. However, when it comes to difficulty, let's not mince words, the game is too easy. And when it is challenging, it's usually because of the rare moments where the game is unintuitive rather than clever. And unfortunately, there's only so much that can be done about it, due to how the game is designed. As one issue, there are the smoothies, which act as your main consumable items. You primarily scavenge for healing items, but you can also combine two of them in a similar vein to Breath of the Wild's cooking, in order to craft smoothies to restore health or energy, as well as offer some extra buff depending on the materials, such as electric immunity or faster swim speed. It's a nice idea in theory, and there is some novelty in finding all of the combinations, but you can make so many of them that, frankly, there's little reason to be concerned about taking damage. However, you can't reduce the amount you can create without also hamstringing how much experimentation we can do, so while there is a token effort to mitigate this, such as making the really good stuff a lot less frequent, it's not enough to surmount the problem. As cool as the final boss was from a design standpoint, no, I'm not showing it off, go experience it for yourself, the smoothies trivialized it to where I didn't have to be nearly as concerned about taking damage. And I hadn't even gone full completionist when taking it on either. Though, to be fair, you'd expect it to be balanced on the assumption that most people won't have searched every nook and cranny. As another issue, the fact that there are this many echoes means that it becomes much harder to design challenging dungeons. It's very easy to get, oh, I haven't used this power in a while, or oh, that's a really cool application of this ability. It's much harder to get, oh, I'm so clever for figuring out this solution, when the sheer number of echoes means that after a while, there are theoretical hundreds of solutions. There's a gimmick that they introduce where you can follow a creature or object that you're bound to, which shows up at both the first and last dungeon. But because I had so many echoes by the final dungeon, the introductory method is easily rendered irrelevant. In that regard, the game is not a total return to tradition, and the worst dungeon in the game is such precisely because of this issue. To be specific, the lead up to the Jabul Waters dungeon is almost exclusively reliant on the water block you get upon entering the rift, and when that section took me 10 minutes without backtracking just to get to the dungeon proper, with it having little in the way of puzzle solving, that was an exercise in tedium which was frankly unnecessary. And to some extent, it's the game's fault for that being the case, because there are 2 points where you're given a choice for which dungeon to tackle next. Because of that, the Jabul Waters dungeon can't rely on any of the gimmicks from the Gerudo Desert and vice versa. The Gerudo Desert gets around this by including novel encounters with the Gibdo and the Windblower Echo. The Jabul Waters dungeon's only major novelties are water-based enemies, some of which we've likely already seen just to reach the dungeon in the first place, spins on flying enemies we've almost certainly seen by this point as well, and the water block, which wasn't enough to sustain the length of the dungeon. And I know that this is the case because after both dungeons are complete, the dungeon following them is one of the best in the game. Oh, I haven't needed to use the spider thread in a while, and now that Try is stronger, this is the first time I'm having to stagger multiple to get over a bottomless pit. Oh yeah, there was also this power I got that lets me summon echoes further away, which I literally never needed to use before now, because that's a power you won't necessarily have if you play one dungeon before another, to where Try felt the need to give a tutorial prompt to anyone who has put the game down for a week and completely forgotten about it. What, did you take the VTuber vs Darkside Phil clip as a challenge to make sure even a short-sighted person like him could get through this? At least they're already making me combine the power with the object movement power for something novel, but still, despite how good the level design generally is, this game is far more generous with its tutorial prompts than it needs to be. Hell, there's a side quest where you're retrieving Kukos that have flown the coop, and are given dialogue about how you can hold onto one to glide for a bit. Right after you've almost certainly seen that firsthand because they put one on top of a windmill. I get if you're tailoring this to a more casual audience, especially given the number of people who may not have played a Zelda game outside of these two, but have some faith in us, damn it. Though, I say all of that, but I can't claim to be all that much better given something I did within the first 2 hours. That was a case where I entered a cave and saw a heart piece staring at me in the face. Gather 4 of them, and you earn some extra max health, so of course I'm gonna gun for it. The way you're supposed to go through this area is to go around, dealing with this little critter however you see fit, such as putting a prickly enemy in its way. Once done, you're given a line of boxes and a new toy to bust through them, in what is another example of the game doing an excellent job at telling you what a tool in your arsenal is capable of without just throwing tutorial prompts in your face. A lesson I wish had been more widely applied. However, because I got tunnel vision, I decided, alright, I really want that heart piece, so how can I use the echoes I've gathered to get there? It took some experimenting, but after determining where my jump could get me, I eventually got up there by putting down a shrub, a bed on top of that so I could jump onto something a little higher, and then a trampoline to clear the rest of the distance. And then I went to explore the rest of the room and, oh, that was how I was supposed to get there, wasn't it? Oh my gosh. Here I am, trying to figure out a way to contrive my way up there, when all I had to do was just walk. Yeah, I'm not sure if this marks me as an idiot or a genius. On one hand, had I just looked around a bit more, that's 2 minutes of my time back. On the other hand, the game allowed me to solve it like this, and I had fun figuring it out, so at the end of the day, do I really care? That said, there were absolutely things they could have done to make the game more challenging. Good joke to let us use a bed to restore health if we can avoid being interrupted, even during a boss fight. But that also takes away the stakes from messing up a traversal section with plenty of hazards in it. Also, whoever decided that fall damage shouldn't exist even for bottomless pits needs an intervention. Speaking as someone who is terrible at platforming, punish me when I'm being an idiot. Don't let me get away with it just because it might inconvenience me slightly more when the bed echo is right there. Why would I work to improve if I don't have a reason to? Regardless, that covers the majority of the gameplay component, but as you're running back and forth taking care of each region's respective problems, there's plenty of people to talk to and a decent amount of exploration and side content to worry about. As far as exploration is concerned, the map gives a decent indication for what you've yet to visit, and you can't walk a minute without stumbling upon something. Though since most of our unlocks are handled as echoes, there are a tragic number of chests that just reward 20 rupees or smoothie ingredients instead of something more novel. Luckily, we're not just beholden to chests, as between heart pieces and crystals we can use to upgrade the direct combat mode, there is still plenty to find. This also lets them throw in a fair number of side quests and a small selection of mini-games. The former weren't usually all that interesting, but since they usually only last around 2 to 5 minutes, they make for something bite-sized you can work on if you need a break from the main thread. The minigames have more variety, such as needing to gather fruit using the replacement for Link's grass mowing tools, or the one reason we care about horseback riding with how many fast travel points are scattered about, or a quote, sleep dojo that offers a set of combat challenges. There is plenty to see, though it is by no means the main reason for you to be here, and I could have skipped over most of it, and my opinion of the game wouldn't change all that much in either direction, as evidenced by the fact that I barely touched horseback riding or the sleep dojo before the credits rolled, which also made much of the latter trivial to get through. The most I'd miss out on are an occasional accessory or outfit, and even then, most of the useful items, like an accessory that grants quicksand immunity, can be bought outright. So, since I care so much about that topic, let's move on to talk about the story and presentation. The simplest way to describe the story is that it's a collection of simple tales told well. For instance, when you visit Jabul Waters, the main theme is that of two very different people coming together and being greater than the sum of their parts. Not an uncommon story beat, but it's told well. Supported by the two people having enough in common to where you can see them eventually working together. And it was well paced from start to finish. The dungeon itself might not have been to my liking, but the lead up to it was. That said, there are points where you can criticize the writing. The main focus of the Elden Volcano region is a young Goron who has just been made chief, who finds himself unsure if he can live up to the legacy his father left behind. I can see what they were aiming for, and the idea they settled on, that you don't have to be your father but merely the best you, is a good message to underscore the section. The problem is that the shift from uncertain to, well, here goes nothing, is a bit abrupt, when it would have been stronger if one or both of the elders we meet had sat him down and told him about their past experiences watching Goron chiefs lead, and how differently each of them operated. Instead, the switch happens when rambling to Zelda, and there isn't a particular moment in the story we can point to and say, yes, that's when everything clicked in his mind. It just happens. So all in all, it's not stellar storytelling, but good enough storytelling. And where it matters, it does deliver. The King of Hyrule prioritizing Zelda's safety over his own when the rift appears? Good stuff. And it ensures when he's talking her up in a side quest later, you believe every word he says. Try having a very different perspective because he hasn't interacted with humans much? A bit silly at times, but it presents a nice perspective that ensures Zelda can be the one voicelessly gesturing this time. A fact which makes me fear how the film adaptation will handle Link, don't you dare screw this up, though there is a part of me that wishes Zelda got written dialogue anyway. Most importantly of all, Link is by no means an afterthought. He is still a hero and an important part of the story without which there wouldn't be one. They spend a decent amount of time making sure you know what he's been up to before we first see him, with him single-handedly saving people all over Hyrule. And to say everything and nothing, he doesn't give up easy. God, I wish there was enough here to warrant a spoiler section, because there's one scene in particular that was equal parts hilarious and glorious. Oh, and before it's asked, I'm not even going to try and decipher the lore implications of this one, as based on what I've seen discussed, I'm ill-equipped to answer anything regarding where this should fall on the timeline or whether it makes sense in the spot Nintendo placed it. As a self-contained story, it works just fine, but good luck trying to figure out how to handle the implications of what we see in context. Moving swiftly on then, when it comes to the visual elements, that's where the game isn't as much to my liking. To be blunt, I don't like the Link's Awakening remaster's art style. Unsurprising perhaps, since Twilight Princess was my first completed Zelda game, and I'm aware that Zelda games have had more cartoonish art styles before, but even compared to that, it feels like a step too far on the cartoon scale. I can recognize that it fits with the kind of gameplay style they're going with, as when you look at it from a top-down perspective, it fits right in with sprites from A Link to the Past or the original release of Link's Awakening, without being shackled to the same technical limitations. That then allows the game to be a neat spin on what came before, while still allowing for us to effectively break the level design by surmounting walls and tree lines using the echoes. I just don't personally find the art style appealing. Still, so long as the technical elements are in good shape, there's not much that I can really dock a game for on a visual level. Even if the visuals are literal trash, you do eventually acclimate to the look and feel of a game. So while they might get your foot in the door, what matters most to me is how well it functions. Given how simplistic the game appears, it's very easy to tell what's going on, with the only exception being when fighting in the water, as it can be hard to tell if you're on the correct vertical axis to actually hit the enemy you're aiming for. There were also very noticeable performance dips when traversing through the world, which seemed to be a result of how much the game was having to load as I was trying to walk through a part of the overworld, which might explain why they decided to hand out an excessive amount of fast travel points, as it seems faster to walk to the nearest one instead of using the map to fast travel to it. Still, even if the frame drops while exploring are really distracting, they didn't impede gameplay since you're seldom directly swinging at enemies, and I didn't notice any performance dip when I was in a dungeon or fighting a boss. In short, get this fixed before the next one please, as I'd rather not have to deal with this as Link if you do another game like this. As one final technical complaint, for those of you who played Tears of the Kingdom, you know how fun it was to sometimes sift through the materials list when you were debating what to throw or fuse to arrows? Not exactly ideal, but it's only one component of many within this game, so it's not a major cause for concern. This game has the same problem, but since it's applying to your main means to do basically anything, the fact that it can take a while to find a particular echo can get annoying. It's still not game-breaking, since you can go into the larger menu to see more at a glance and do have sort options in the quick menu, but it is still annoying when the echo you're looking for hasn't been used in a while and you've gotten used to sorting by recent. So after saying all of this, was Echoes of Wisdom everything I was looking for? Well, yes and no. It was a nice change of pace to play as Zelda this time, and the dungeon design was definitely a step up from Tears of the Kingdom. That said, due to the echo gimmick and the sheer amount present in that system, there's an upper limit on how challenging the game can be, which meant it was at its best in short sessions staggered over a few weeks, rather than something that could keep you engaged for hours at a time. At its worst, it was merely okay, and at its best, it was a fun little adventure. In short, I'd say it was worth my time, and I can recommend it regardless of your experience with the franchise. For those very familiar with it, let's be honest, you've already played it, and likely found it too easy if a scrub like me who struggled with A Link to the Past isn't having any issues here. If your only experience is the more recent open world offerings, then this makes a good entry point into the more linear games. If you're someone like me who missed the traditional dungeon structure, then this does get closer to the reason why we like the franchise, and is a welcome breath of fresh air because of it. And if you're entirely new, then given how easy it is, it's a very different beast from the rest, but still a fun time. All in all, the right game at the right time, and I hope we get more interesting experiments like this in the future. That's all I have for this video. Thank you all for watching. Please like and share this if you find it deserving, and subscribe to this channel for more reviews as well as other content posted on a semi-regular basis. It's been relatively quiet over here due to some personal business I needed to see to, but it's good to be back, and the next year is going to be a busy one. It might be a while before we look at Zelda again, depending on when I find time for some of the older games or if we get surprised by another one within the next year or two. But here's hoping whatever they have for us next ends up being compelling. Until then, thank you all once again for stopping by, and I'll see you all later.